Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, a registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for you guys to hear this next interview. In front of me, I have the amazing Amanda Walker. She is a health and life coach and podcast host to Feel Amazing Naked. Amanda, welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to connect.
Yes, me too. So the first question I always ask the person I'm interviewing is always to say who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
So as you said, my name's Amanda, and I am a health and life coach. I run a virtual practice helping women feel amazing naked, but I also want to add that I'm a mom, and I think that's a really important piece to this puzzle because entering into motherhood is a huge life change, both in body and mind. So I'm really passionate about supporting moms. Why I do what I do, really in short, is I've been and still am. I think health and fitness is an ever evolving journey, but I was on my own personal journey, which was really driven by an aesthetic shift that I felt that I had to arrive at to find this ultimate place of fulfillment. And after I hit that mark, I was completely unfulfilled, struggling both in my mind, and I was freaking hungry. And it was that light bulb moment that helped me realize that the only fulfillment I was going to create was my own. And that had to do with some inner work. And from there, I've kind of united those two things, this physical transformation along with this internal transformation, so that when a woman arrives at that destination, they feel there's equality between the external and the internal.
I love that so much. And this has come up before in other conversations that I've had, and just in general, it's kind of like that self-confidence that people gain when they lose weight. Is it in fact the fact that they have lost the weight, or was it the stuff that they did along the way? And then there's those people that arrive there, and I hate to tell them, and I've gotten better at it, like up front, whenever I'm talking to a new client, I've gotten better at being like, listen, I want you to get what you want, but it's not all it's cracked up to be unless we do the other work, because otherwise you'll be 20 pounds later, but be like not happy. And the whole purpose of doing this is to be happy. Yeah. So I love that you said that. And I think we all have to kind of go through it to really get it. But I think what you're expressing is that you've helped people see it way before, so they don't get there and be like, well, that was a waste, and then maybe even reverse all the effort that they put forth.
Yeah.
So I went to your website, which I love. So beautiful. It's so, it's just really great. And I loved, there was a quiz. I was hesitant to take it. I probably should have. I think it would have been good, but I was like afraid what was going to come up. I'm not going to lie. But your whole thing is teaching people to really get to the root cause of kind of like, they think they want to lose weight for one reason, but usually it's a lot deeper than that. So can you speak a little bit more to what you said, call the root cause, and like why people really want to change?
Yeah, I think even before that is this notion that we all know what to do on paper, but why don't we, right? For the vast majority of people, we know that we should eat whole foods. There's, advantages to doing that and to moving our body. But then this deeper question is, why am I not doing it, right? Or why am I not seeing the results? So for me, when I look at a woman that I'm working with, the question for me is like, what's underneath that? What is deeper? The reason isn't that you don't know that eating lean proteins and vegetables and, complex carbs is going to help you. There's something underneath it. So is it that all or nothing, mindset that holds you back? Is it that just flat out you haven't made it a priority, or you don't know how to make it a priority, right? Or there's this proactive piece that you're struggling with. So that quiz that you mentioned is a series of questions where people can go and just discover what's that main kind of root cause that is likely holding them back. But I think you and I would both if you took it, it probably doesn't speak to you as much because you do what you do. Mm-hmm. But I think there is a little bit of that in each of us. Mm-hmm. And if you're out the other side, it's because you've faced it head on and you've put in the lifestyle habit, formation changes to overcome that root cause.
Sure. Yeah. I'm wondering, and you don't have to give specific names, but I do believe that specific examples is helpful. Like, could you give maybe an example of a client that came to you that thought they wanted something for one reason and then they figured out the root cause was another?
Yeah. So, what I see often is confusion, honestly, among women. And, they say, I'm sure you see this too, but, Amanda, I eliminated carbs. I've been eating or exercising, 7 times a week, and I am gaining weight, right? And there's no way that I can be gaining weight going through this experience. And so for me, what I like to do is just ask those deeper layer of questions. And one of the root causes is lack of education. A woman just does not, sometimes women just are so adhering to old thoughts around diet culture that they believe it as true, right? That thought has been thought for so long that it becomes true that their only way to progress is through restrictive tendencies. Yeah. So I feel like this might speak to your message more, is just that less is more in their mind, when is actually not the case. So then upon, further diving, we can reveal the truth that it's not about restricting less carbs over training. That's actually the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would guess my other question would be, like, when you do start to kind of do the work now, say you do educate them, and now that you teach them that sometimes less is more, and that sometimes you don't have to work harder, we just have to work smarter and all of that stuff. Now, do you come up with any other types of resistance, or is then there another root cause? I just feel like there's just a lot of layers.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm just curious kind of what you found with that, and why is it that we are so difficult? It's like so difficult for us to change and I think because of the deeper root causes, like it would, treat us like we deserve to be treated. I feel like that is always the layer and the barrier that always comes up, is like, we're so easy to take care of feed our kids, I don't have kids, but I'm talking to like the moms today. Yeah. Feed our kids, get our kids on the bus, make sure they have, they're getting driven here and there, and everything about them is taken care of. But when it comes to us, even after being educated, it's difficult I find, like, for people to still kind of follow through with it.
I think you're right. It's layers, because I think you're constantly peeling them back as you go through a journey with someone. And I think when education is up front, there's this, when anybody signs on to work with, a practitioner, that beginning, zest of motivation is there, but that's going to fall off, right? And so I think that education is so important in the beginning. But once that starts to fall off, there is stuff underneath it. And what I find is that women really compartmentalize their lives. It's like work is here, kids are here, myself is here. And so the missing piece is finding efficient ways, or finding a big picture task to weave all facets of life together. So I teach something called a grounding day process, which might look on the surface, the end product is, what are you making for dinner? But it's really looking at what your life looks like on a weekly basis and saying, what do I want my life to look like this week? What do I want to accomplish for myself? Because women believe, especially moms, that they don't have time. That's the story they tell themselves. I don't have time to get in my workouts. I don't have time for healthy meals. And the truth is, we have time if we choose to make it a priority, right? If you want a date night with your husband, you come out of nowhere to create that space. And so through that, like, self-awareness and just starting to look at your life almost like a bird's eye view, aerial view of how do I want it to look and what's getting in the way of it looking that way. And then just being really freaking honest with yourself about what's stepping in between me and that outcome that I'm desiring, and how am I going to kind of go all in on myself.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you have to, like, reverse engineer it. So I love, that's like a really, really helpful tip, is asking yourself, how do I want to be? How do I want to feel? And then what is it going to take for me to get to that point? And I think very often people think that it's going to take, eating perfectly portioned meals and meal prepping everything and putting everything in like Tupperware containers. But really, it's just making sure healthy food's available. And like you said, it ends up coming down to like, all right, as long as I make sure that I cook in the beginning of the week, things will probably end up a lot more smoother. And then I'll be able to eat healthy like I wanted to.
And I think people want the sexy, fancy stuff, right? Mm-hmm. They want to go to, level 10 strategies before they've mastered level 1, 2, 3, and 4 basics. Because saying out loud, well, I just meal planned and I lost the weight I wanted to. That doesn't sound sexy, but it's those most basic fundamental habits of, making sure, as you said, healthy foods are readily available, getting 8 hours of sleep, moving your body a few times a week. Like those things aren't very sexy. And those, though, are the things that will pay dividends to the long term and create a sustainable approach that you can easily come back to week after week after week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the best thing is having that healthy foundation is always going to pay dividends in the long run, for sure. So I would have to ask more about your podcast. The title is amazing. Feel Amazing Naked. And you just mentioned something you do like a grounding day. It seems like you have really awesome systems. So I'm curious what you implement with your clients to get them to feel amazing naked. Like I'm curious if it has to do with actually the nutrition plan that they're on, or that, like you mentioned earlier, there's more like kind of like deeper work. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, the concept I was with some colleagues and we were just kind of like giving that, very generic elevator pitch when we first met each other. And the one colleague was like, but what do you really want to do, Amanda? What is it that you want to help women do? Like, I just want women to feel amazing naked. Just thinking about what it feels like to move through your house with like your clothes off or take them off and not be afraid to see yourself in the mirror. And for me, that's not like a perfect size. That's not a perfect shape. It's a feeling. And that feeling is cultivated because you've created self-confidence. And my interpretation of self-confidence isn't like being a six-pack shredded self. It's just saying I'm going to do these things and following through. For me, that is the ultimate form of confidence. I did what I said I was going to do for myself. And I think that's where women struggle. And I know in both experience, we said, we're going to go do this thing. And the moment we do it, we automatically are like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking like superwoman today. And I want women to have that constant feeling. And so the program, of course, there's frameworks and things within it, but the food part, there is no plan. I don't give a plan other than like eat balanced foods, eat protein. And I think a woman should be entitled to be whatever, size she feels good to her. And along that journey, though, is also, reflecting on why you feel like you should be a certain way, but what actually works for you. And so I think that end goal is feeling amazing naked. Looks different for every girl, but it's where that outside, is less the driving force and the inside is the most important piece.
I love that. Yeah, that's super important. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The definition of confidence is it's not, and that's also too why setting unrealistic goals, like even working out 6 to 7 days a week and, making sure that everything you eat is perfectly portioned and all of that is not helpful because it's so hard to stick to. And now you're beating yourself up because you worked out 5 days a week instead of 6 or 7. And doesn't matter what you look like, you don't feel good about yourself. And then you're feeling less confident. So I think what you're saying is it's better off to kind of have like these small goals, gain that self-confidence, build that momentum, be really proud of yourself to look back and be like, wow, like I've consistently, not just for a week and then stop doing it, for 6 months, I've been eating well, exercising, sleeping well, taking care of my needs and also helping my family. And then you just start to feel so good about yourself that you just love yourself, and like, it doesn't matter like what size you are, you fall at the size that, because also too, like, I think naturally if we're taking care of our needs, like, it's difficult. I think we're going to arrive, might not be a supermodel, quote unquote, like size 2 6-pack abs that we would think, but we'll still arrive at a healthy, decent, like a weight that is still healthy for us. I think it's not possible to really be at a very unhealthy weight. We're either being super skinny, super thin, or being completely, more on the obese side, if you're actually following through with all those other things. So I think you'll naturally just arrive at a place that feels good to you and that is actually healthy both inside and out.
Right. I agree. And I think part of the problem or struggle that we have, and I mean, I feel this in business too. So I think you could put whatever, content you want around it, is we want what we want right now. Mm-hmm. And so you as a person have to decide, do I want this to last though? Or do I just want this short-term progress that I'm doing in a way that isn't sustainable? And so when you can back off and say, like, I truly want a lifestyle, and that takes releasing this notion that I'm going to get that thing overnight, and instead allow this slow, steady trickle of, one progress marker being met, after one progress marker. Because often girls want to be like, okay, I'm ready to eat the right foods. I want to journal every day. I want to move my body 7 times, and I want to meditate. And I've never done that before in my life. I'm like, well, we're going to do one of those things. And we're going to get really dang good at that one thing. Yes. And then we can trickle in the next thing. And so it's just that built-in notion that we just want to go fast, and we want that thing right now.
Sure. So you mentioned earlier, because I agree with your kind of your systems and how you would help people. You mentioned earlier that you had kind of gone through it personally, and you've gotten to this size, to a certain size, and you weren't feeling fulfilled, and then you had to do like deeper work. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about like kind of what you did, maybe a little bit more specifics of like how you did get to this place where you realized, how I feel is more important than how I look? Yeah.
My son, who's 8 now, I got really sick after I had him and had found out that I had gluten intolerance. Never had that before. I was in and out of the hospital. He was 6 months or 6 weeks. I was like trying to nurse him and just horribly ill. And so that was one of the catalysts for an already, I have a background in science as well. And that was, though, a big catalyst to dive deeper into the food part. And once I really started gleaning from that so much in my own journey, I began to work with a few other coaches and internships. And I think at that point, this light bulb shifted for me of like, well, how far can I take it? Like, oh, okay, I get it. That picture perfect 6-pack physique, like it's closer. Like, how far can I push myself? Mm-hmm. And so, I was weighing lettuce at some point in my journey. And I realized now, right, hindsight, of course, Monday morning quarterbacking it, so much of that was just all about external validation, right? Mm-hmm. Especially, I was in an environment with lots of friends. It was like we were all almost trying to like go through this transformation of who could go the furthest. And I remember just this picture my husband took of me, and he was like, wow, you look so good. And I was like, thank you. And everybody was complimenting me on this particular, day. And I remember coming home and like, oh, like they all think I'm so like, I've reached the pinnacle, and I was like ready to pass out because I was under eating. And so I think I mentioned that just because there was just so much reasoning in my own head that was like, I needed that external validation. I wanted to show everyone that I was capable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, I was building my business, and people were coming to me because they said, Amanda, I want what you have. And sure, I was like helping them and using, specific tools, macro tracking being one of them. But then I had this like powerful aha of like, I'm sending people on the same journey ultimately, and digging a little bit deeper but what do you want from this? Why are you after this? And so much of it was for that external validation. And I think that was just the powerful shift of nobody's going to validate me by myself. And all that matters if I love me. And I didn't freaking love myself at that time. I was feeling a hot mess on the inside. And that's the first time I really reached out to get support, not just in business, but also in my life, for somebody to help me really start to dig into my own thoughts that were definitely limiting my growth.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know that sometimes it's not always easy, but it's definitely appreciated. And one thing that you were saying made me want to talk about this, because I feel like I've never really done like a full episode about it, but it's important. And it's the compliments from others. Like, their intentions were very good, but they were not good, because they were putting this pressure on yourself, and they were now making you feel, I know they didn't mean to do this, but how you internalized it was like, now I have to keep up with this. And they think I look so great, so whatever I'm doing and get to look this way, I can't stop doing that. And I think that's really, I think that's something worth kind of talking about and expanding on a little bit. Because I don't know, I have people that get these comments, and I almost feel like we shouldn't really comment on people's weight. I don't know how you feel about that, but I've just always, even as a dietitian, I'll never comment, because I know that I don't know how that person is getting to that way unless they are opened up to me first and said, I feel so good. I've been eating like balanced and well, and I'm just like really, really proud of myself for the action. Unless I get that first, I'm always hesitant to make comments about people's appearance. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I can't say I feel the same way I did even 5 years ago,
right?
But now I get it. Now I see the internal turmoil that's going through somebody, but it could be an illness, right? That they're suffering from that got them to that. It could be, an eating disorder. It could be whatever, insert thing. So I'm definitely more cognizant of that outcome, unless I'm personally invested or have like background knowledge on that this is something they're actively trying to work on. And I think a degree beyond that is, you and I do this for a living. So then, it's this additional thought of, will they respect me less? Do they think I'm not capable if I gain 10 pounds back?
Right.
Ultimately, that's where I'm at now. I gained, 10 or 15 pounds from that freaking happiest ever in my body. But there was that element of like, this is like a snowball that's going down the hill so fast. And how do I stop it? How do I get control? And, but I think now this was the most important part of my journey that set me, allowed me to pivot and do deeper work instead of just surface work.
And I think you're beating people to where they are going to end up anyway. So I think it's also really important. And I've noticed that too, like as a health professional, and if you claim to be an expert is knowing more than the person before you. Right. So I've always needed to be, and it's not a pressure, it's just like a responsibility. Like as a registered dietitian, as a business coach, like as someone who wants what's best for people, I would be doing myself a disservice if I wasn't constantly kind of seeking that deeper meeting, or like seeing what's the next step, or like what happens after this. And I think that you've realized that you got to that place, and it makes you a better coach, because now you're helping people beyond what they even came to you for, beyond what they even expected. And I know how that feels. It's so cool when you can see someone kind of like just like you a big sigh of relief kind of comes off of them, because they thought you were going to tell them that they had to do X, Y, and Z, and that if they didn't, they were less than. And now you're kind of giving them permission to just like cut themselves a little slack and just work on the little things. Yeah. And it's really awesome to watch.
I 100% agree there.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So, let's see. Is there anything that we didn't go over, any topics or strategies or something, maybe some helpful tips? Maybe we could give the listeners, if they feel like maybe they're sitting there and they're thinking, but no, like I really want to get healthy. I really want to get fit. I really want my body to change. Like, so like I hear you, I want to feel good on the inside, but I do want to feel good on the outside. What would you say to somebody like that?
I think there's both an education that is valuable in working with a practitioner that can kind of audit, where are you? I just think an evidence-based approach is the best way. And there's no program that works best for anyone. I just think that the more education and deeper level of understanding you have of what's true and what isn't, and kind of getting rid of the diet hearsay is like a really, really important piece. Through education, empowerment, you get rid of fear when it comes to food. And I think so many women make their food choices out of fear rather than power.
Yeah.
So I think that's one, is just educate. And step two, I am such a geek and obsessed with journaling. And it's a tool that I'm constantly urging clients to work with to get to that deeper piece. And a lot of women will say, well, I've never written a diary. I'm not a journaler, Amanda. I'm not a journaler. And I'm like, I wasn't either. Didn't write in a diary growing up. Didn't start using a journal till after I was 30. But I can say that it's the single, probably most powerful tool that has helped me change, and understand myself, because there's something like 50,000 thoughts in a day we think in our heads, but we don't hear them and we don't listen because so much of the time we're trying to dim them down and judge them. And so just allowing yourself to more openly allow those things to come up and gain a better sense of self-awareness about what you actually want. It's like, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, do you actually want to lose 10 pounds, or do you feel like you should lose 10 pounds because that's the right thing to do? And so just having more honest conversations with yourself when you can do it on paper and free flow, there is so much value in just seeing like what's stirring inside.
I love that. Do you ever, I'm a journaler too. I've always been a journaler. So I hear people tell me they don't journal. I've had journals, I think, since I was able to write. Like it's
amazing.
Like lime green, like leopard, like I was 9, I think was or I had to be younger than 9. Anyways, I've always been a journaler. One thing I don't do, and I want to get better at doing, is going back on old entries and reading them. And I don't know, I guess there's a fear there of like that I didn't grow, or a fear of like judging myself for who I was then, which is ridiculous, but that is something that I want to start doing more of, to really kind of challenge myself a little bit more. But I'm curious, do you do that, or do you advise that, or against it? I'm curious what your thoughts are with that.
Well, I think somebody starting out, I advise against it, because that's actually a belief that stops people from moving forward on journaling, because they're afraid of other people reading it too.
Yes,
they're afraid of going back and reading it. And like, you don't have to. There's no rules. You don't have to go back and read it. The action of journaling, that moment, that experience, is where the magic is. It's not going back and reading it. It's just like putting it out there and then continuing to do that day in and day out. And then what's done is done. So I think you could, it's kind of fun to reflect and go back and see where the growth might be, but there might be ebbs and flows in that growth. And that's okay too. So I have them, I keep them, because maybe one day I will, but I have years of journals in my cabinet back here, and I've not really gone back and looked.
Yeah, and no one's reading them, right? You can trust. I know. I think we should say that. That was a good point. Like, I think people are probably afraid, like, their husband's going to find it, or the kids, or something like that.
Well, when I first started journaling too, it was almost as though I felt like my senior English teacher was over my shoulder. And so that perfectionist mindset wanted to come out with perfect grammar, perfect handwriting. And so it forces you to show up more authentically when you finally say, this isn't for anybody but myself.
Yes.
And so there's no judgment here. This is what's on my heart. This is what's on my mind. Here's the thoughts I'm thinking. And when we do that, we just gain such a better sense of self-awareness, and we don't beat ourselves up, because we see like, this is normal. This is human. And I gain so much knowledge about myself from seeing it in front of me.
Yeah, that's so helpful. That was great. I feel like I've always recommend journaling, but I've never really given the specifics or like kind of, challenged some of the limiting beliefs about it, and like talking about like writing without judgment, nobody's watching. I think that's really that was great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
we definitely needed that.
I'll give you one tip that I find really helpful is if that's a practice that you feel like you're craving in your life, is just start with a 2-minute timer. And the commitment is you're not going to lift the pen off the page for 2 minutes, and you're just going to write. And what that allows is if you're just flowing, and this might become 3 minutes or 4 minutes, but eventually what happens, that critical brain will start to dim, and all the good, juicy subconscious stuff will start to oh, there's stuff buried underneath there because I got all of that stuff that's front loaded down. So I tell ladies, today I'm not, even if it's something like I really want to journal and I don't really know how. And I heard on this podcast that I should journal for 2 minutes, but I'm not sure what to write. It's like all of your internal dialogue, you're writing it down until all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I just got this visual. I just got this thought. And so just stick with it and slowly, add a minute, maybe every week.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. Wow, this has been so awesome. You've had so many helpful tips. Is there anything else that you want to add to our, and just talk about or share with our listeners?
I mean, I feel like we hit so many amazing points together. I think the take home for me always is that, the evolution is highly personal, and what each person comes to the table with and what each person leaves on a journey with is going to be different things. And so if you feel like you want to go all in on yourself, just there's no right way other than your way. So just stay true to that mission.
I love that. This is so great. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know that my listeners are going to love this, and they already love you. Let them know how they can connect with you. Maybe I know you're on Instagram and you have your podcast and your website. So share all that stuff with them.
Sure. So you can visit my website at feelamazingnaked.com. There's also a link to the podcast, and the podcast is also called Feel Amazing Naked. You can search it on all platforms, podcast player platforms. And on Instagram, I'm A Walk My Way, like Amanda Walker My Way. Awesome. And I'm sharing lots of fun stuff there too.
Yeah, and definitely go to her website to take that quiz, because I feel like I want to do it.
Yes, you should go do it.
I love quizzes.
Or there's a link that says take the quiz.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for being here. Guys, thank you for listening. If you're not already subscribed to the Tips with Tony podcast, please subscribe. It allows other people to find the podcast, but more importantly, it will notify you when a new episode comes out every Monday and every Wednesday. As always, this is Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.